Hello and welcome to another episode of Simplified, your friendly game show panel. Your friendly news show. That's not the thing. What are we again, guys? 300 episodes in and we still don't know how to introduce this show. Anyway, it's a podcast, 4 friends having fun, talking yak, something. And at the end of it, we all learn something and have a good time. Does that describe Simplified?
When the we needs to be qualified, it's like the host learns something, the audience is like, your mileage may vary.
Audience learns that there are 4 people definitely goofier than them, so they feel good. Yeah, I think that's a big appeal of Simplified.
Yeah, that's actually a good benefit proposition that we can give for Simplified. Like, you feel better about yourself by hearing us make fools of ourselves.
Yeah.
There is some things that never go out of fashion. The same self-deprecating joke about Simplified.
Yeah.
100 rupee note unless someone decides to ban it.
100 rupee.
Wow.
Psychology again, basically.
Too meta about this now. Okay, so folks, I finished reading a famous book recently, The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. I thought we'd just talk about it since, we are...
Hey, wait. It's not... I've just got Water Lily's Wikipedia open. I thought it's Psychology of Money.
Oh!
I could have done the Malu joke also. Psychology of Money, which is like, why
are boys like this?
Oh man. Okay, so let's start off with a little bit of get to know the host better kind of question. What was the first, substantial thing that you bought with your own money?
Naren.
No,
yes.
I've of course my blazer story is well known. That is right. So the TLDR of that blazer is I bought a blazer and it turned out to be exactly the uniform of the Taj waiters. But there was another thing I bought a little after that, which also, have I told you the story of Radha Krishna Cement?
I don't care if you have.
Oh, the stock.
Yeah.
The stock, no?
The stock, yeah. So basically, I bought a lemon. This was in Harshad Mehta times. And people would tip, right? People would come and very conspiratorial whisper. They would tell you, buy this stock, and Harshad Mehta after it. So I was told by the very reliable source of my colleague who's sitting in the next cubicle that Harshad Mehta was buying Radha Krishna Cement. And apparently Harshad Mehta and my friend in the next door cubicle were the only 2 people who knew about it. So I was the third guy. So I went and bought it, and long story short, it is a nice long story. I could go on for another 10 minutes. But long story short was actually Harshad Mehta also sort of lost. That was one of the few stocks he probably lost money in. And I have those share certificates, and we have a financial advisor. He told me very sadly that these shares would be more useful if they were printed on softer and more absorbent paper.
So, fabulous.
Yeah. Amazing. The lemonade from which you have made, the lemon of a stock that I phrased that damn badly. The first thing that I ever bought with this I think was my internship money from Micah. I got the first month's salary and or stipend, right?
You worked before this, huh? You worked before your MBA. I just
Oh, correct. I forgot that's complete.
Cleared all of that.
That's true. I was going to say I bought an electric guitar from Calcutta with my internship money. The first substantial thing that I bought from my software engineering days was a small Creative music player. Yes, I remember. You remember Creative? That brand? It used a ubiquitous speaker. Yeah. So I bought a small Creative Zen or something. I bought it from, what is the famous mall in Chennai? Spencer Plaza. Spencer Plaza Mall.
Oh man. Yeah. So much throwbacks.
Or something. Yeah, many throwbacks happening. I'm pretty sure the storage was some 32 GB or something. And we're like, yeah, wow, 32 GB.
Yeah, so...
good old days.
Yeah, the first thing I bought with my own money, actually, Chuck, you bought it for me. Actually, I paid you for it, which was my Sennheiser HD 518s, which I bought in 2012 when I started working and I'm like, this thing, it was like some 7,000 at that time. And I was just looking up I was just going back to my emails and I found them on, you sent me an email about you buying it from eBay from someone and then I paid you for it. So,
my goodness, eBay.
Yeah,
Right?
eBay. Yeah, deep cut. So that was
there we
the
go.
first.
I see it.
Yeah. Sennheiser HD 5.
Infotech has shipped item Sennheiser HD 518 headphone with 2-year warranty on
Exactly.
27 July 2012. Amazing.
Exactly. Yes. So that was the first thing I bought with my own money, really. That too, I bought it. I mean, my regular salary was just going in rent and everything else. This is also, I bought it with money I was, which I did, where Chuck and I did IPL commentary for Sifi.com.
Oh my God.
Yes. So yes, so that is the source of the money as well. So yeah, I mean, we had some fantastic times doing that. Additionally, I think now it's time to declassify the fact that I fell asleep while doing commentary during one match, and nobody noticed. Nobody noticed. But yes,
So if the editor is listening to this,
yes.
You guys were Sified before you were Simblified. The Imbli came in later.
Yo.
Simplified has Sifi in it. Okay.
Yeah.
it works. Yeah.
So yeah.
That's almost a crossword clue.
Yeah, something like that can be one of those. No, the first thing I bought was when I was in college. Like there were these DASA kids, not like slaves. DASA meant like direct admission for students abroad. So like very like fancy, flashy kids who like are then dropped into NIT Warangal. And they had like good phones as in like phones with camera and stuff like that. And I always wanted to have a phone with a camera. So the first thing that I bought was one of those Nokia some N something series phone that had a camera in it. So yeah, very wise investments all around.
Hey man, the Sennheisers actually lasted me like a solid 7-8 years. I used them properly for 7-8 years till the foam of the earphones got all shitty and then I had to throw it away.
Naren's stock is lasted 40 years, okay?
Yeah, I don't want to show off, but I still have the certificates. I don't want to show off, but excuse me. Hold my beer.
Amazing. So that segues nicely, I think. I'm not sure if we'll be able to take away lessons from here into what I thought we'd talk about, which is this book that's been doing the rounds called The Psychology of Money, or to give it its full Christian name, Timeless Lessons on Wealth, Greed and Happiness, by an author called Morgan Housel. Morgan Housel, I believe, is a partner in some firm or something like that. And while one would have expected a book like this to be all technical and about fully about stocks and PE ratios and all and whatever, Gopalakrishnan Index, right? What's that? All those sort of things. It's nothing but it's a very light, easy read. It's just good old common sense. And and I would actually go to the extent of saying that this is one of those things I'd say should be required reading when you are in your early 20s or so. It's really about, how to approach money, your relationship with, you're building a healthy relationship with money and having a positive attitude towards savings and not being very enamored by show of wealth and stuff like that. So I just thought we'd talk about that since that's the kind of stuff that we do on this new grown-up version of Simplified, is the post-300 show era.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean,
I feel
it's more groans.
I don't need to go to the gym any longer because I've got this huge weight on my shoulders all the time now.
Naren's blazer just aged 10 more years.
So I think out of the four of us, just Tony and I have read it. So Tony, I'd like your, what did you think of it?
So this is, I read it.
I ask you because you are usually the one with slightly contrarian views.
No. So this is, like you said, it is mandatory required reading, right? And like one of the things was that I went from the complete opposite spectrum of like money and wealth and stuff like that. I think this book also refers to it in terms of like how everyone sort of what they value in terms of investments or money is shaped by where they grew up and what their influences were and stuff like that. So like my grandfather, very famously, like the stories I've heard about him, he never cared about money, right? So like he had a sort of saying in Malayalam which went like panam trinamana, as in like money is like grass. Even if you try to like put it on my head, I will do a headstand and make sure it leaves me because like it's a pointless kind of thing, right? So from there, so like my sort of investment started way later compared to when I started earning. At least I think like probably 8-10 years later than it should have. And then like I think now I've reached a stage where at least I know what is what, right? And like when you're growing up, like you said, should be mandatory reading for us growing up because like you think that there is nothing to it and stuff like that. And compounding is obviously one thing that is vastly underestimated when you start out, right? But I think my single thing that I remember from this book, which I've taken away, I'm not even sure if it's from this book, is that the only way to remain wealthy is to make sure that your tastes or like that your expensive needs are always like below what you earn, right? And that is as much a philosophical lesson as it is an investment lesson to say it doesn't matter what you do, you will remain wealthy as long as your tastes are like below what you earn, right? So, and I found that very, very fascinating because like I always have a very sort of objective view about a car or the drink that you have or anything like that, right? Like car is supposed to take you from point A to B reasonably comfortably. But like don't do it for the brand value or anything like that. Or like I'm perfectly happy even now drinking Old Monk because what are the prices in Mumbai anyway? Like, right? So I think it is from this book, but yeah, that resonated with me a lot to say the only way to remain wealthy is to sort of have tastes that are not as expensive as what you earn, basically.
Yeah. Actually, let me start with the second thing that you said. The quote, the exact quote is a brilliant one. And you are absolutely right. This book is as much a philosophical book as it is how to, I wouldn't say how to get rich, but rather how to be wealthy over the long term. I suppose it sounds a lot more boring. The exact line is, saving money is the gap between your ego and your income, which I think is such a beautifully phrased line. And everything that you said actually fits in quite nicely over there. He goes on to give several examples of people from his personal life and other people who, I think one of the best examples he gave was an Indian origin person who grew up in the slums of Calcutta, went on to become very big. I forget which bank it was. He went on to become fabulously wealthy. And then he kind of...
Rajat Gupta, right?
Rajat Gupta, yeah. And he became super greedy and then he lost everything and is now spending time in jail. So his point over there was, hey, listen, you've already gone that far. Why risk everything for what is moderately little? So he has a way of phrasing these very nicely and conveying them in very pithy lines that stay in your head. The first thing actually that you said is really about compounding. And I suppose that's one of the things that I definitely want to speak about, especially with Naren, who has a few more years compared to us on this planet. And one of the quotes that he's put over here is a well-known stat about Warren Buffett, but it's just worth reiterating again, just to show the crazy wonder that is compounding. As I write this, Warren Buffett's net worth is $84.5 billion. Out of that, $84.2 billion was accumulated after his 50th birthday. $81.5 billion came after he qualified for Social Security in his mid-60s. And the point he made over here was that Warren started investing when he was 10 or 11 or something like that, with the money he made from a lemonade stall or something. And this investment thing really started from there. So the point he's making is no matter how little it is, start early, because that $1 back then will do a lot more right now. So yeah, compounding. Let's talk about the magic of compounding with respect to money, I suppose, or even relationships. We have spoken about this on the show many times before, but Naren, I specifically want to chime in over here.
So the problem or the thing about compounding is this, right? It happens even when you are not doing anything. And most of us, we have a bias for action. We have to be doing something. We have this inbuilt understanding that you cannot make money unless you work for it. And the thing is that actually you can. And that is why you need to take advantage of things like compounding. Everywhere in the world, including in India, the stock market has outperformed every other investment class by miles, every other asset class by miles. I mean, just gold, real estate, nothing compares. And people can't get over that. Actually, even in real estate, it's compounding that works. So, you buy a piece of real estate and you expect to grow. It's frustratingly zero growth for many, many, many years, and all of a sudden it grows a lot. So that's compounding. Yeah, I strongly agree. But I do know, and I've been in my life, I've had many, many occasions where I have chosen to put money into my business instead of into passive investments because I had this bias for action. And I don't think I think I have underperformed the market by a lot. Had I invested that amount of money in the market, I would probably have made a lot more money. But it would have required me to just sit tight. So that is something that people can't get you. So I'm talking from the point of view of an entrepreneur. If you're working somewhere, I guess it's a lot. I've never really held a serious job other than the first 2 or 3 years that I worked for the Tatas. And so I don't know what it's like to be the recipient of a monthly salary. But yeah.
I think that's an important point because I think, if I'm not mistaken, is the first book of the chapter that says nobody's an idiot. Nobody is like making a irrational decision, at least in their own minds. Somebody might be buying a stock or an instrument which you think is stupid, but it makes complete sense in that person's head. Coming to your point, the action that you took might be completely rational for you, but it might be completely irrational from the point of view of, say, hardcore day trader, for instance, saying that, hey, why aren't you letting this grow or something like that. So I think one of the takeaways from that was respect everybody's situation. You don't really know what they're going through and all that. And hence Tony's point, right? It's very much more a philosophical book than a psychological.
I think his phrasing is reasonable is more important than rational, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is correct.
Yeah, another nice,
especially sort of just to put in,
Yeah, sorry, one point I just wanted to draw on what Naren said, and I think it's a very important takeaway from that in the compounding angle is the action fallacy or action bias, so to speak, right? Like, I think that is it's a very important point as far as the psychology of like money or any of the other things are concerned, because there is, in human life itself, there is a bias that if you're working hard, then if you're doing something, if you're working hard, then it will reap dividends in some way or the other. But that's not how money works. Money doesn't work when you work hard behind it. You can potentially earn just as much if you like let it be, and in fact more if you let it be. Because that's where, in fact, if you look at some of the deeper instruments also that come with finance, like for example the derivatives instruments, right? The derivatives instruments, which are like, for example, you're basically betting that a stock will go to X point or Y point. That's where majority of the money goes, like saying that, okay, the stock will go X or Y. But the majority of money is made when you say the stock will not go anywhere and stay here, right? So, and that's where, 80% of the options that are created about stock movement actually expire worthless because of the fact that the stock doesn't go anywhere. So actually it is more, the bias is always towards the money, towards the stock price and this thing staying relatively still or sideways rather than actually going, like making extreme leaps anywhere. So everything moves a little slower than human thought and human action does. So actually having like really sudden actions and taking like split-second decisions, while it might make you feel good because you're doing heavy actions, it is actually counterproductive to how money works.
Yeah, 100%. And I think he does a lot of analysis of stocks itself. Like one thing is, if you just zoom out over a point of time, the graphs, all of them do go up, right? I remember one of the pages, he had just put a stock market graph of the NASDAQ or Dow Jones or whatever it was from the 1930s all the way up to 2022 or whenever he wrote the book, was obviously completely up. And he said, would you believe that in this time there were 2 world wars, so many people died, this happened, massive, basically listing down
exactly.
all the seismic events that happened. And he says, see, despite all of this over a long period of time, things do go up. So he litters the book with a lot of anecdotes like this and a lot of quotes of wisdom. So I gave you the Warren Buffett one, another one that he quotes related to compound interest with Charlie Munger, who inspired Warren Buffett or was Warren Buffett's friend. I forget which of the two.
He bought lemonade from Warren Buffett.
Oh, he bought lemonade. He said, compounding is magical, don't interrupt it. Or the worst thing that you can do with compounding is interrupt it. Or something.
Yeah, I've heard that, yeah.
Let it do its job. That kind of thing. And one final thing I remembered, again, on the power of compounding. He writes a story of this man called Ronald Reed. And he was a unremarkable man. He was a janitor in local school and beloved by all, etc., etc. And he worked there for decades. And when he died at the age of 92, his family was surprised to find out that his bank balance was $8 million. And that was purely because he accumulated money slowly. He didn't have too many flashy expenses. So the point he was making was, you don't need a fancy job or outsized returns or a nuanced investment strategy or anything. You just need to be consistent, trust compounding, and
leave it alone more often than you do anything with it.
Sorry?
Leave it alone more often.
Yeah, leave it alone. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Just put it somewhere and forget about it, basically.
Yeah. Another thing that I took out from there, which I kind of really liked, was, what seems rational might not necessarily always be the best thing to do. And I see a lot of this, especially with respect to debates on housing. In fact, our Deepak Shenoy today had posted a nice long tweet on this. He's like, this rent versus buy business has been going on for a really long time. Right? And I think he just broke it. He just put it very simply. Listen, if it's a fiscal decision for you, rent. It's a no-brainer. But if it's an emotional decision, like many people who buy a house don't do it because it's, unless of course they're buying house for investment purposes, a completely different thing. It's not the most financially sound decision, but let's face it, the fact that you're buying a house, it means a lot psychologically, which you can't really quantify into money. And you might have some quirks or some wants like that, for which you might be willing to pay a price. Like you might be willing to pay over what the market is demanding, as long as you get peace of mind for something. I used to do one thing, and I still do one, which a lot of my friends who are MBAs in finance sneer at me for, which is I try to maintain a zero credit card balance no matter which time of the month it is. The conventional wisdom says, no, you should like max it out till the end of the month and then accumulate points. I don't give a shit. I get anxious if the outstanding amount is more than like 5,000, 6,000 bucks. So I try to clear it off as much as possible, as soon as possible. Possibly losing some credit or whatever along the way, or whatever points or whatever shit that might be. But that was my little thing, and I completely resonated with, doing something irrational and maybe even expensive, because what the tables and what the graphs say is rational might not be the best or right thing. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, so just on actually, when I said reasonable versus rational, I was about to bring up
reasonable versus rational. Yeah, that's the title. Yeah.
I was about to bring up the whole buy versus rent thing, right? And like, just to tie it back to the other thing that he says, which is, I think that depending on like when you were born and what the market was like at that time, the rest of your investment decisions follow, right? So like my only crib with the whole buy versus rent argument is that money is fungible, a house is not, right? Like I think Deepak Shenoy compared it to a car, which is, not the greatest example, because the car you drive today is not going to be the car you drive 4 years from now, right? Or 5 years from now. The house you buy, unfortunately, you're stuck with it unless you're like very fond of dealing in a lot of paperwork and doing this and that and the other. And the bigger reason why I'm like sort of, again, like people sneer at tech bros saying, why is everything about investing and shit like that? But it's really not. It's that we've grown up in an era where parents have forced us into a lot of things, right? Like we are probably not engineers by design or whatever. No offense to them. Like they grew up in a completely different era from where we are growing up now, right? And at their sort of time, housing was very cheap and it was like a rational place to put money into, etc. And they sort of force this decision upon you, right? Like after you're done X number of things and you're 30 or 35, like the next thing they'll tell you is buy a house because that's what they did. Yeah. And that is where the problem is, to say like, have you evaluated it for yourself? Because being stuck with an EMI for 30 years is unfortunately not a reversible sort of thing that you can do, right? And therefore, in my own experience, I've spent like 10 years in Bombay and I've moved at least 6 flats. 2 or 3 times because the owners sold the flat, but mostly because I sort of felt that as my family grew, our needs changed, that we needed a bigger place, etc. Right? So it depends on a lot of things, but what I'm fundamentally against is the idea that there is sort of one foolproof investment strategy for 100 years. Right? That's never the case. And being like the person giving you advice is not the person who will be stuck with the decision for the rest of their life. Therefore, probably evaluate it for yourself. So that's where I sort of net out on the buy versus rent thing. But I'm sure it's like a very sort of emotionally charged decision for the longest time.
Charlie Munger said never to interrupt compounding, but we must interrupt this episode because it's time for a little break and we need to catch our breaths. So just a little bit and catch you on the other side. And now back to the conversation on money with the Simplified gang.
And not just emotionally charged. I think I was kind of confronted with a similar decision recently for my parents, really, because my parents moved towns and they moved to this thing. And from there, all the conventional, I would say conventional as in all the modern wisdom, conventional, not modern wisdom would suggest that they would be better off renting for like the next foreseeable future considering their life stage and all that stuff. And that made a lot of sense to me. In fact, I properly put down all those points and made those arguments to them and all that stuff. But then I evaluated it from the perspective of what is the cultural and the life stage psychology at that particular point of time, right? I just realized this, I just recalled this recently when, my parents do this Ganesh Puja every year, right? And in that they have this old recording of this Pandit who says, we've digitized it and put it on MP3 and now that guy does the puja every year or whatever, we put in this thing. And there is one part where he says that the question is asked, but the pujari is asking questions when he was originally doing it. And he said, is this your own house? Because then I'll do this additional puja and all that stuff. And then we do the whole puja accordingly and all that stuff. And I've seen that every time that question is asked. And my parents have always done the puja in their own house, always. When they were in Ahmedabad and now in Bangalore also they purchased their own house. There's almost a sparkle in their eyes because having your own house from the culture that they come from, the background they come from is a huge thing, right? It's you've won at life. Right? You got your own house, this is your own place, you own this space and all that stuff. So while a lot of things didn't make sense, financially, growth-wise, flexibility-wise, a lot of things didn't make sense. I was and especially with the life stage, and then I reevaluated my own life stage psychology questions. I was at their life stage, the satisfaction of being able to be in your own house actually trumps everything else. So all the financial and pragmatic decisions can go to one side, especially when it comes to Indians. And I'm saying this applies across multiple life stages, right? That whole thing about going out there and answering that question of whether you're in your own house or someone else's house or you're renting all the time because you have not, so to speak, settled in India until you've got your own house, right? So yeah, and quoting Rohan Joshi in that is what are you mud to settle? But that's exactly how a lot of Indian psychology works. And I think it is, while earlier I used to scoff about it and feel people need to be more pragmatic, I feel I've softened with age in some way, and I felt I think we need to account for these things because it is, money is a tool for life, right? And if your life itself, you're saying that, okay, I'm going to suspend all those things I like for making more pragmatic decisions, I don't think it makes sense then. You have to make non-pragmatic decisions to continue in your life. Otherwise, very pragmatically, we should all be dead. Yeah.
This is when you know that a planner has grown up in moves from functional benefits to emotional benefits.
Yeah.
That is a brilliant observation, by the way. I hope it makes its way into some real estate brief or the other. Sparkle in your parents' eye when the Panditji asks, "This is your house." What a brilliant observation! For everyone who is not from the advertising world out there, insights and observations like that are what end up winning FE cases. Actually, that's not such a large. That's not such a big.
Yeah, it's not really.
What do you think? You've been sitting silently, but possibly these questions have been marinating in your head for.
So the owner of the most prime real estate of all of us. But anyway,
that my dad built this house, so I had little to do with it. I'm just sort of the beneficiary. What I wanted to talk about is what Tony mentioned about your needs or your wants being modest, or keeping your needs or wants modest being the best way to do any kind of financial planning. Because so there is this also, I think we have discussed this on the podcast before, this mimetic desire thing, right? So a lot of our desires come from the fact that we feel obliged to compete with our fellow people in our social network, right? So a lot of it is also unnecessary. Cars and houses are stellar examples. So people like to have statement cars. Actually, we had one guy from our MBA batch who had this big thing about, and so he came to one of these alumni meets back in the day wearing a Rolex, and everyone obviously noticed, and everyone had a tacit arrangement not to notice the Rolex, so not to talk about it. And the guy kept going nuts, right? He kept looking at his watch, he kept talking about the time, and finally
my hand is paining. Can you?
He was. Yeah, and eventually, and people are very heartless, including me. So we finally forced him to tell everybody that, boss, I've got a Rolex. So I said, Rolex. And somebody said, oh, I thought it was a Casio. And that was like, killed it. So that you can imagine the pain. This guy spent a lot of money. He was earning more or less what anyone else was earning. He scrounged, he saved up his money, and instead of putting it to any other possible use, he tried to buy a Rolex so that his friends could go wow, and his friends, being his friends, refused to give him even that pleasure. So you need to identify those pleasures and not invest in them.
There are at least 4 characters like your friend as characters in the book. Like there are full of anecdotes of people like like this.
Yeah. No, but I mean, so like obviously everyone's like different levels of pragmatic and have different vices, right? Like thankfully one of mine is not like the greed for money per se, but my vices are, I'm not going to tell you, screw it. But like you have to recognize that sometimes.
Have you heard of this Vice of the Vice Admiral? Have you heard about
Go ahead.
So there's a naval joke. So what is the Vice of the Vice Admiral? The rear of the Rear Admiral. That's
Super.
Oh man.
Yeah. No. So I was saying like I'm pragmatic to a different degree, right? The one thing that irritates me every time I go to like my parents' house or any house of like where older people live is that they would never have taken off a sticker that came along with the TV or the plastic cover and all of that. And like I see it and immediately I rip it off. Like I get so annoyed because like you bought this thing to use it. Why do you keep it like it's supposed to
protect resale value? But no, I mean this is actually really funny in that way that there is. This is actually a lesson about money which I kind of like learned and internalized through poker, where in poker there's a concept of saying that you need to look at the chips on your table not as representing money, but they are the tools with which you play the game, right? And so you have to use those tools. Unless you use the tools properly and you use the tools effectively, and unless you use them, you're not going to get ahead. And if you hoard tools, it's no use having a toolbox full of like a shed full of like unnecessary excess tools which you're not going to do anything with, right? So the point is you have to keep them always in use and you have to kind of keep moving them. And if you lose them, that's the game. That's part of the bet, how it works. But unless you bet something, you're not going to get anything, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, using that philosophy, I mean, in that context, I see like I spent some time like examining like how Western cultures, how the money works in Western cultures versus Indian cultures in some way or the other. Like in India, culturally, we are terrified of debt, right? Like we're so terrified of debt as a concept that everybody is like, oh, if I'm in any kind of debt, like almost, I mean, I don't know exactly the psychology behind it. It may be OCD, but Chuck, to some extent, like that, the credit card bill having like wanting to pay it off, like once it hits like a certain level, it comes from, yes, there might be a OCD angle to it, but it also comes from an historical angle of I don't want to accumulate this debt when I have the liquidity to pay it off, right? So there is a lot of like that attitude is very strong there. But conversely, like in Western cultures, debt is just like a part of life. Like you live with debt very comfortable. People can like have good sound nights of sleep with like being in extraordinary amounts of debt, right? So I feel there's a good balance between, understanding both these cultures and like having the background of not accumulating unnecessary debt, but also understanding that debt is a tool which can help you like get ahead in life is a great like balance that you require between. And that's why knowing how money works in different cultures is a really big advantage, because then you get to like understand and use the best of both cultures. Because in India, again, the thing with I still remember this. I was having a conversation with my father about something, and like when the pandemic happened and a bunch of stocks crashed and all that, he was, if he was left to his devices, he would have literally like withdrawn all his money, put it inside a shoebox and put it under his bed, right? Like that was where the psychology went. He's like, oh my God, this market is this thing, all my hard-earned money will go away type of scenario. Versus like the other people are like, oh, this is a full opportunity, let's pump all the money in here and put it all, like a lot of people did with Bitcoin. Right. And so there needs to be a balance between those two ideologies. And like the more you learn about how money works in different cultures, the more like richer your overall understanding of how money can work.
I actually slightly or harshly disagree with that, right? Because
excellent.
One of the things is that like Warren Buffett has $85 billion. So what? Right? Would he be any happier if he had like 1 billion versus, right? So a lot of the time
he would be significantly unhappier if he lost $84 billion. But anyway.
If he didn't have it to start with, he would have been
losing. Didn't have it to begin with. Fair. Understood. Yeah.
So my sort of thing is that like you need to understand that there are also forces at play that want you to, like casinos famously work because they will get you a winning initially so that you sit the whole night and lose everything and leave, right? So I always think that, again, personal advice here is that you should only invest that amount of wealth that is disposable to you, right? Like if you want to get something now and you feel good about it, don't put it off, because like I think again, sort of another sort of learning from my parents has been that they invested a lot in real estate because it's a great thing to do at that time, right?
Yeah.
But my dad at 72 is still struggling to sell off the land that he bought way back in like 89 or something like that, right? And I'm like, there is no need for you to sort of have earned this for your future generations, because the opportunities that you present us with are much more tremendous.
Yeah.
I'd rather you enjoyed this money while you were alive, right? So
exactly.
There is both of that aspects. One is that never, invest more than disposable income. Like I think like taking debt to invest is like the worst thing that you can possibly do. And also like sort of realize, what do you really need at the end of the day? Like what amount, and you are best in control of the needs that you are evolving or will have and stuff like that. So
but weirdly, one second, maybe I just expressed myself completely wrongly or whatever, but I think we are completely in alignment. That's exactly what I was trying to say as well. But anyway, go on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But Naren, go. You were saying something.
Yeah. So I just wanted to chip in with an anecdote, which, so what I can relate to what Tony was saying about invest in experiences rather than material things, because there is a lot to be said for experiences. The time that you have today, it's not going to come back. And sometimes you need to look at your money from the utilitarian angle, right? So money is useful in many ways. So you have to put it to use. One of my friends told me he bought a BMW. He bought a BMW second hand, a BMW 7 Series thing. And he told me that he had a choice. He could either buy the BMW or take his family on a world tour. He chose to buy the BMW. And he says the guy who sold him the BMW, he took his family on a world tour. So that puts it into perspective.
Yeah. But there's another sort of thing, right? Which is that apparently like behavioral economists, I think Thaler or Kahneman or some of these people have studied this thing, and they found that there is no difference in your level of happiness depending on what you earn, except in one case, there is always one set of people who are perpetually unhappy. It is lottery winners. when you get like a one-time big payoff and then you sort of change your lifestyle completely, and then like it's not a money that will keep coming to you, right? So they change their lifestyle. Same with like someone who buys a BMW or Benz or something. There are like so many like running expenses and stuff like that, and that's a losing problem.
Yeah, and additionally,
There's also something called a hedonic treadmill. Have you heard about hedonic?
Hedonic treadmill.
Not hedonic treadmill. Hedonic adaptation. Sorry, hedonic adaptation.
Yeah, it's kind of like the same thing, right?
Yeah. So basically, if something really good happens to you, you get really happy for a certain amount of time, and then it goes back to your base level of happiness, regarding of how awesome that event was. I mean, you could somebody could buy your company out for $1 billion, and you'll be back next year roughly at that level.
Yeah, this is exactly
both ways.
Yeah. This is something that, I mean, I was going to make the exact point. This is what Yuval Noah Harari describes as the luxury trap, right? So it's the whole thing about being that the moment everything's a luxury till it's unattainable, and the moment that luxury is attained, it becomes a base necessity and like something that's mundane almost. Like the moment, I mean, you dream of riding around in a private jet. The moment you get your private jet, it's just like it's another vehicle. It's no different from the cycle that you own, right? So
to add to the hedonic treadmill that you were talking about, Naren, this is other fantastic point, a fantastic concept that I came across on some podcast. I forget which. Most likely the Tim Ferriss podcast. Have you heard of the dopamine baseline? I don't know if I've spoken about this on the show before.
No, I've heard.
So basically, what happens is, and this explains the lottery winner phenomenon quite well. This is the higher your dopamine spikes up because of an outsized activity like that, the farther down it will crash. So your baseline actually reduces. Right, so when you've had that outsized, think of it almost like glucose, right? When you've had a lot of sugar together, it feels amazing.
Or alcohol crash.
or alcohol, right? And then it crashes back down. So in effect, you are actually left sadder than you were when you started. And the broader point that he was making was regulate that dopamine so that your overall satisfaction becomes higher rather than the peaks of happiness that's coming in. But I think that's another show for another day. But
as Mr. Newton hypothesized, what goes up must come down.
and goes down even more. But I think this is one big, what we're talking about right now, I think is one huge point that comes out in not just this book, but several others as well. And definitely something I've been thinking about as I grow older and wiser, which is thinking about happiness, not necessarily what the, money gets you. It is, I think, Srikeit, both you and I are very, very aware of the fact that you can have a decent amount of fun on a salary, which is not all that much. And I actually think, that I think the period that shaped my approach to money was actually when I just started working in Bombay. It wasn't a very great time because I graduated bang in the middle of the recession, and we had to take much lower salaries than our seniors were getting and what our juniors eventually ended up getting as well. And with Bombay rent and the education loan hanging over heads, it meant that I had a grand total of around $5,000 a month as discretionary income, right, which I could do for enjoying and all that. And I stretched that 5,000. I was very proud of the fact that for about a year and a half, I was able to stretch that, go for gigs and, go for treks or whatever with that little amount of money. And I think that, at that point in time, I was like, hey, you know what? $5,000 is all it takes really for me to be happy in this city. I think that time was very important for me because I was also like, oh no, I need to have a salary of whatever 80, 90 lakhs right out of B school if I have to enjoy the life that was promised to me. And those few years taught me that, hey, no, not really. That's not the case. And I still feel that way, even though things have changed drastically from there. But I think that point of happiness and temperate lifestyle, I think, is an important point. Sorry, Naren.
Have I told the story of Joseph Heller and Kurt Vonnegut?
I think you have, but I think
enough number of times.
Yeah, enough number of times, and it's there in this book also. By the exact anecdote, I was like, oh boy, if we talk about some simplified Naren, we're likely to talk about it.
Okay, so then I will tell you. I will talk about a poem written by Ogden Nash.
You are like ChatGPT for anecdotes.
I know.
Do you have ChatGPT? Does he have ChatGPT open right now?
So Ogden Nash wrote this poem. I have to read it out. I remember parts of it, but not fully, so I'll just read it out. It goes like this. In faraway Tibet, there lives a lama. He got no papa, he got no mama. He got no wife, he got no chillin. He got no use for penicillin. He got no soap, he got no opera. He don't know Irium from Copra. He got no songs, he got no banter. He don't know hope, he don't know canter. He got no teeth, he got no gums. Don't eat no spam, don't need no tums. He loved to nick him when he shave. He also got no hair to save. Got no discussion, got no distinction, no clear head. Don't call for Calvert, drink milk instead. He used no lotions for allurance. He got no car, no insurance. No Alsop warning, no Pearson rumor for this self-centered non-consumer. Indeed, the ignorant have not. Don't even know what he don't got. If you will mind the box stops, comma, I think I'll go and join that lama. So...
Wow, brilliant.
It's one of Ogden Nash's most serious poems. So
yeah,
fantastic.
But he also has another one, right? Which I need to sort of bring up. But I'll tell you the Lama one. You know his other Lama poem.
Oh yeah. 1L Lama, he's a priest. The 2L Lama, he's a priest. I will bet my silk pajama that they read.
The thing is a 3L Lama. And then he ends it with a footnote saying, it has been brought to my attention that there is something called a 3 Alamer conflagrations.
I just love Ogden Nash.
But Ogden Nash's other poem to balance this out is, I would live all my life in nonchalance and insouciance, were it not for making a living, which is rather nuisance. Nuisance, but like spelled like
Well done.
But Chuck, I think another aspect this book talks about a lot is luck versus risk, right? And I think that's also sort of worth talking about. I think there's this story of this guy who shorted the market when it was about to crash, and he made like 100 million or some crazy amount like that.
Yeah.
And he assumed that he was like the most brilliant trader on the planet.
This was just on the cusp of the Great Depression, if I remember.
Yeah, and then kept making like bet after bet and losing money.
No, I mean this is the forget that one Great Depression guy. This is the story of all those middle class retail investors who have got in during the COVID resurgence, right? Because like for a year, anything you put money in was growing by 20-30%, right? And at that point, and that's the bulk of the retail investors who are now stuck with like terrible IPOs and holding a whole bunch of stock of like certain wallets and all that stuff, which are completely like worthless effectively at this point, and they are effectively stuck with their money in the markets because for a year they had that thing that because I'm such a great investor, I'm growing everywhere, but didn't realize that it was just like the market was on its way up. So yeah, I mean we have that entire resurgence of what they're calling the Indian investor resurgence, basically just a market phenomenon where everyone was getting money no matter what.
No, I think like he has some great quotes based on this. And I think those are like more because it's psychology of money. I think I'll read one out. Basically, he says some people are born into families that encourage education, others are against it. Some are born into flourishing economies, encouraging of entrepreneurship, others are born into war and destitution. I want you to be successful and I want you to earn it, but realize that not all success is due to hard work and not all poverty is due to laziness. Keep this in mind when judging people, including yourself. Yeah, and he also goes on to say, be careful who you praise and admire. Be careful who you look down upon and wish to avoid becoming. Or just be careful when assuming that 100% of outcomes can be attributed to effort and decisions. And I think that is probably like a very, very valuable thing.
No, I
say that like everything in life is dependent on luck.
No, and that's also something which, impacts. I mean, I know it can be criticized as overtly woke and just like lip service. But the one thing that's happening a lot, which I've noticed around here, like, there's a lot of homelessness in this city in Toronto where I am right now. And there's a lot of people who live either on subway stations and stuff like that, right? And the important thing is, at least, the one thing that's become a huge movement right now is just to not call people homeless, because when you call someone homeless, that's like, this is who they are. It's part of their identity. So it's actually shifted to saying these people are experiencing homelessness, right? So it's people experiencing homelessness. I know just using a different terminology is like just lip service, but I think it's an important fact to kind of highlight that aspect, because there are people who experience homelessness from time to time. Like we saw, if you've seen the movie, the Pursuit of Happiness, right? So there are people who can experience homelessness from time to time, but they don't become homeless. They are not that's not part of their identity.
Yeah, this is homelessness, especially in America, is very brutal, man. It is just you miss one rent, you lose your job, and firing Americans companies. It's a way of life in America.
They're ruthless,
you basically get your And for people who haven't had the wherewithal to plan for the future, it means instant destitution. So
and it's not even the wherewithal. There are some people who just can't. They're living paycheck to paycheck because that's exactly the skill set and that's the industry they work in.
Goes back to what Tony said, right? A lot of life is really dependent on luck, and I would append that quote that you just gave with, of course. I'd have to do my one Scott Galloway quote per episode thing over here. Neither your success nor your failure is your fault.
Yeah.
And I thought that was another very nice way to say kind of like the same thing. Yeah. Another quote that I want, and possibly we should wind down the episode with this. I didn't think that we'd be talking about this for about an hour. Is I think the biggest takeaway from, if I were to distill down this entire book into one line, it's this very nice quote: money's greatest intrinsic value, and this can't be overstated, is its ability to give you control over time. And ultimately, I think that's really what matters. I have felt this as a freelancer a lot, although I didn't think of it from a money point of view necessarily. When I made the transition from being employed to, doing this, for me, what I realized I ended up valuing the most was actually the fact that I have complete control over my time.
Okay.
Complete control, actually. Control over time, control over who I work with, control over the kind of work I take up, and the ability to just say, screw this, I have enough money in the bank, I'm going to go away for, say, 2 months or something like that. Although haven't done that.
But additionally, also just to add to that, and having freelanced for a bit myself, it's also the ability to control your work environment, like the way you will be treated, the way the people you work with, the way you set the terms of how your employment will be and how you kind of conduct your business. I think that's a huge there's a huge freedom which is quite underrated, especially among Indians.
Yeah.
Sorry, please continue.
100%. Yeah. So, no, that's about it. I think that is the last point I really wanted to make. If I say anything more, it's just like we're going to be. I think people should just buy the book and read it. It's a really easy read. It's just about. I think it'll take 4 hours or something. That's really about it, and it's very entertaining. It's actually quite light as well. Tony, any other final closing thoughts, since you're the other co-reader on this?
Co-reader.
Yeah, no. I think we've covered a lot of it. And I think at the end of the day, earlier today, we were on another group having a discussion around how people appreciate food and what is best and all of that. And basically, I think it's similar, right? I've grown up eating palapam and chicken curry and kappa and fish curry for breakfast. So for me to appreciate a Gujarati thali, it takes a lot of effort, right? And Srikeit
where you're going with this
point of view. And it's exactly the same for money as well, right? What gives you joy or happiness may or may not cost money, and what sort of how you invest, etc., is intrinsically personal. So I think that's about it.
Wow, we have grown older, wiser, and better. Before I let Naren do his usual thing, the first time I came across this, I just want to tell you guys about this. The first time I came across this book was actually on a Twitter thread about a year back, where one guy had uploaded the pirated PDF version of this. Tony remembers this. He put it up and said, "This is a best-selling book, Psychology of Money. If you want, you can get it from here." And he tagged Morgan Housel. And Morgan Housel replied to that saying, "Why did you think that tagging me would be a good idea?" And then the poster replied saying, "Listen, do you want the book for free or not?" Since then, I was like, I don't know who this guy is, but I'm going to buy this book just for this. But I'm glad I did. I think it's pretty fantastic. So, Naren.
Take us away.
So, Yeah, this was a lovely discussion. Thanks, guys. And stay safe, stay
Wealthy, I think,
grounded,
would be
stay wealthy.
Grounded.
Yeah.
Compounded.
Or
Yeah,
compounded.
stay compounded. Stay compounded.
Stay compounded. Nice. I like that.
We should
And
have a
stay
t-shirt.
simplified. And stay simplified.
And stay simplified. Yeah.